2, 3.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and thanks for joining me again. This week we're going to take on a bit of jump blues, that fantastic blending of jazz and blues styles, the precursor to rockabilly and rock and roll. It's a style that's very close to my heart, and in today's lead study we're going to be taking our inspiration from players like Bill Jennings, Billy Butler, Tiny Grimes, Junior Watson and Little Charlie Baty, to name just a few. For this lesson I'm using my custom shop 50s Strat, and I'm on the neck pickup, beautiful low wind pickups in this guitar, and I'm plugged straight into my Lazy J20 Fender Tweed style amp, and I have the amp cranked. I'm on the bright channel and I've set the volume to 10. And although I'm staying on the neck position for this whole study, I do really like position 2 with this kind of a sound as well. As always, you can get my full and thorough lesson materials at the links in the description. I have a Patreon where for a small monthly fee you get access to all of my lessons, past, present and future, or if you just want this one lesson in particular, check out the Gumroad link. Either way, thanks for your support. As I'm sure most of you guys know, for most of my lessons I make my own backing tracks from scratch, but this lesson, like a handful of others, I opted to use the fantastic Cinelli Brothers backing tracks. I've linked to those in the description, well worth checking them out. The most authentic and old school backing tracks I've ever heard. Okay, so into the lesson. For our first phrase we play this. If you're looking at that through the pentatonic lens, you could see that we're starting with the A major pentatonic and then going to minor pentatonic with a little bend on the 8th fret, which kind of takes us back into the major pentatonic, but we don't want to quite get all the way to that half tone bend. Just a lazy quarter bend at most. In some of my previous videos we've gone into some depth on how to blend the major and minor pentatonics, so I'll drop a link in the description to a couple of those videos so you can check that stuff out. Next phrase, again it's mostly the major pentatonic. Again until that final note, which is the same note we added earlier on from the minor pentatonic, the flat 3. Another very subtle quarter bend on there. By the way, for that little pull-off, I definitely would recommend picking with an upstroke and then a downstroke on the B string, and try and get that to become a flick with the right hand. And notice how I'm favouring downstrokes a lot of the time, again just to add that extra bit of muscle on the front end of the note. For me that's a big part of how to get this sort of heavy driven muscular tone. Now we're entering the 4th bar of our 12 bar blues. We're still on the A chord at this point, and we're going to play this very common chromatic descending line. Thinking A major, the 5th, and walking down to the 3rd, but instead of going straight to the 3rd, go via the semitone below, minor to major 3rd slide that is so typical in blues. Then the root. Now we're looking ahead into the next bar, and we see a chord change coming up, so we're going to try and tie into that chord. That's our D major chord. We're going to walk along the A string until we get to the major 3rd of it. So you can really hear the changes there, can't you? The 1 moving over to the 4. Now we play this. couple of bends. You can think of that as A major pentatonic, or you can be thinking more about the chord tones as they relate to the D chord that's currently being played. This little move is the same one we did earlier, one octave higher. Now we're about to head back to the A chord again, so we set it up with another one of those chromatic descending lines from the 5 to the 3. We put a little bit of extra style in there along the way. Now we're about to hit the 5 chord. We play this, which is very simple. We're on A major currently, so we're thinking of this A major triad, and then we grab the 5th of the E chord, the 5 chord. That's all we need to suggest that change to the 5. Now we're heading to the 4 chord. We play this, targeting that major third of that D chord, then a bit of blues scale. Now this is a really easy way to make the blues scale sound more chord specific. You know, usually in the A minor blues scale, you'd have this 5th fret on the D string. But because we're playing over the 4 chord, we want that major third at the 4th fret, so we just adapt that one note, and now we have this kind of a hybrid scale, which sounds very specifically like it's outlining the 4 chord. Now to get back to the 1, we're going to play a Charlie Christian type of phrase. And that's a name I should have mentioned at the start actually, because I do feel like he was kind of the root of all of this stuff that would follow. So we're getting this A6 kind of tonality, courtesy of using the 6th triad of the key of A. F sharp minor. There's your 6th. Major 7, back to the root. Very swingy, very bebop sounding. Now, although I actually played the whole thing wide open with the volume all the way up on 10, for the sake of the lesson, for this chord part coming up, I'm going to roll it back a touch, just so things sound a little cleaner. So we're currently in bar 12, and we're about to embark on another go round the 12-bar blues. So we play a turnaround, so essentially we've got to hit the 5 chord. We go for this voicing. One of my favourites, the Freddie King voicing for an E9. You've got the flat 7, the 9, the 3rd and the root. So the root for this chord is the top note. Now in bar 1 of our second go around the 12-bar blues, we're going to play this. All of that is A7, A dominant sort of material. We're thinking A6. Again, that triad F sharp minor that we had earlier, but an octave higher now. Slide in from a semitone below. Add the little finger to 12, pull off, slide back, and 4th. Play all of this stuff with a heavy swing feel. And then we're thinking A13, but we're going to start a semitone above and drop into it. This voicing is the same as the top 4 strings of your A13 chord often played down here. Imagine this grip, and imagine the low E string is up on the high E string instead. Now imagine we're moving to the next string set, and that's what we have. Now A major pentatonic, with one of these nice little moves where you've got this bend on the B string 12th fret, but I'm also including the open E. Now in bar number 4, we're looking ahead and we see on the horizon that the D chord is coming up. So we're going to play a phrase that leads us to it. We're going to quote a wicked Billy Butler phrase from his famous honky tonk solo, which I do have a lesson on, by the way, so check that out as well. We're going to play this. So we're thinking of A7 and all of its extensions, like the 13, the 9, the flat 7, and there's your major third, your landmark. You can be visualizing an A7 arpeggio, or thinking of one of these common Charlie Christian shapes, like the 3 to 9 arpeggio. All of that good stuff. Now to get to the D major, we go via this little bendy thing. Then there's the root of D, and then one of those typical double stops. Minor to major third on the G string, with the B string 10th fret included. So that's the Billy Butler phrase. we're going to chuck this on the end of it to strongly suggest D7, the 5th, the 6th and the flat 7. Now again, we see on the horizon that the 1 chord is coming up, so we think, how can we get from 4 to 1? Well, there's 2 really common ways to do that. One is to go from the 4 to the 4 minor to the 1, and the other way is to go from 4 to sharp 4 diminished to the 1. We're going to do the diminished one now, and in the next part of the solo we do the other one, the 4 minor. So we're thinking D to D sharp diminished, back to the 1. You can hear how well that works. All we're doing to suggest that is we're going to go D major, right, the root and the 3rd, and then take that root a semitone higher, and suddenly we have D sharp diminished. You can be thinking of this triad. And then connect it a semitone higher to the 5th of A, and then grab the root. See, when you know where your intervals are, it really simplifies things. You don't have to grab entire scales to suggest a certain tonality. You just grab the note that really matters. D major, D sharp diminished, A major. Very simple. And in fact, if you took a D7 chord and simply changed the root note from D to D sharp, look what you get. D sharp diminished 7th. Now, a big part of the jump blues thing is the inspiration that it clearly took from bebop and swing music. In those styles, although it seems counterintuitive for the blues, it's not uncommon to play the major 7th for the 1 chord. We've already done the major 6th for most of this, but now we're going to go that one step further and really Charlie Parkerize it. A major 7, minor to major 3rd, typical blues style, the 5th, the major 7th, the 9th, back to the major 7th, then the root, and then the 5th. Gentrifying the blues a little bit, eh? Who'd have thought? Now another common jazz blues touch, when you go to the 5 chord in a jazz blues, often you'll make it a 2-5, so B minor 7 to E7. To get down to that B minor 7, you often have this chromatic rundown from the 3rd chord of the key. C sharp minor 7, C minor 7, B minor 7. Again, if we know our fretboard, and we know our triads at the very least, we can easily find things to suggest that chord run. For example, what we do here, C sharp minor, C minor, B minor, just using the D and B strings and creating a bit of a rhythmic patter with it. And then a chromatic rundown, suggesting that we're going from B minor 7 to E7. There's your flat 7 of B minor and your major 3rd of E. Now on the 4 chord, the D7, we get a little fancy and we play this. Very similar to earlier at the end, that walk up to the major 3rd of D, but we're starting with this flattened 5th kind of sound. To me, I'm thinking A melodic minor scale here, which sounds really cool on your 4 chord, the D7. Kind of suggests D7 with a sharp 11. Resolve to the A chord in a very simple way. Just grab the root. And then another one of those Charlie Christian licks, exactly like the one we used earlier, the A6 kind of sound. Now for our 3rd and final solo, we're going to start with some double stops. We're going to play this. Thinking A7, there's your flat 7 and your 9th. And then 7th fret and 5th fret, and double 5. All stuff that sounds good over an A7 chord. And then that sort of bluegrass thing, minor to 2nd degree of the scale, instead of minor to major 3rd. Coming down this group of notes from the major pentatonic, which immediately makes everything sound swingy. Again, it's that thing of including the 6th. There it is. Makes a huge difference. Bring the 6th in on your blues, and suddenly it gets that one step closer to swing blues. Finishing that phrase with a nice little move. Minor to major 3rd, the 6th, minor 3rd with a little bend towards the major 3rd, and then the root. Now we're still thinking A7, but we see that in a couple of bars time we're getting to that D chord again. So we're going to start walking our way towards it by strongly suggesting A7 with a couple of alterations, namely the flattened 5th and the flat 9. We're going to play this. Resolving to the 5th of the D7. This is a great little piece of vocabulary. So that's flat 7, 6th, 5th, and then sliding down to that flattened 5th to give that extra bit of tension before going back into the land of the normal with the 6th and the 5th again. And then a bunch of enclosures around the major 3rd of A. And then the flat 9, flat 7, walking up to the 5th of D. That lands right on beat 1. Very common bit of Charlie Parker vocabulary. And as throughout everything so far, we want to play that with a very heavy swing feel. Now on the D7 we play this. Which has a few little things going on. A bit of A minor pentatonic, but then going back to that major 3rd of D. Then a bounce back and forth between the 5th and the 6th of the D chord. Flat 7, coming down that scale of notes, which I guess you could call D mixolydian, although I'm not really thinking of it that way. The 3rd fret, that's our minor 3rd of D, right? So that suggests D minor, and that goes back to that point I made earlier about different ways to get back from 4 to 1. This time we're taking the 4, going 4 minor to the 1. Very pretty sounding. It's what they call the plagal cadence. Now you might think that's all a bunch of fancy gibberish, but it's really important to be able to set up the next chord so that you're leading people's ears towards the harmony. You know, this is why they call us lead guitarists. We should be leading the melody, leading the music. And I'm sorry to say, but that involves a bit of awareness. And that resolves to your A chord via the 5th there. Now I'm picturing this A5, good old power chord at the 2nd fret. And we play a little boogie line. So this is A5, and then an upstroke, and then 3rd fret, 4th fret, again minor to major 3rd, and then this little flat 5 to 5 movement. If you want to pick near the saddles for a bit of extra sass, kind of helps things a little bit. Now we're approaching our 5 chord, we go all the way up here, and we're visualizing this E9 chord, rootless. This might look like G sharp minor 7 flat 5, and that's for a good reason, that's because it is. But we're thinking of it here as E9. There's your major 3rd, flat 7, 9 and 5th. And as is typical in the blues, and as we're used to doing now, we're going to start a semitone above and land on it. We could have gone from below, but from above sounds cool. And then we play. So this is again thinking E9 or E6 to E9 to be specific. C sharp minor triad. Notice how I'm fingering this with the little finger on the B string instead of the 3rd finger. I find that easier. Maybe you will too. So theory-wise that makes sense, doesn't it? That tracks with what we said earlier about the A chord. If we wanted to bring in the sound of A6, we think of what would be the 6th triad in the key of A, F sharp minor. This is no different. If we want E6, the 6th triad would be C sharp minor. There it is. Now if you move that down a whole tone, you're going to get an E9 type of sound. So essentially we're thinking major to dominant just by moving the same shape 2 frets lower. And then the same stuff all again on D7. Passing chord into the D9. D6 to D9. And then we're going to resolve to A6. Again, same kind of approach. The triad, the F sharp minor triad this time. The little passing chord before it. That's of course outlining E to D to A. Now we need a turnaround to finish things off. We're already on this A6. Now we're going to do this line that I took from the Bill Jennings solo over Big Boy. D major triad next, so there's your 4 chord. D sharp diminished, that's that sharp 4 diminished we used earlier. A6 again, really cool voicing for A6. Very Chet Atkinsy. So we're going from A6 to D sharp diminished, back to A6. You can kind of run up and down that line as and when you choose, just make sure it fits rhythmically. The way we're going to phrase it here involves a lot of offbeat stuff like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Finishing on A6 here. Again, F sharp minor triad, just the next string set. That top note came down an octave to the D string. And again, typical semitone passing chord into it. Phrase it differently there, on the beat. Whoops. And that concludes our jump blues lead study. I really hope that you enjoy working on this. I think this is such a great style to explore. It's kind of got all the hallmarks of good guitar playing in it. You got the rootsy, bluesy soul of it all. You got the interesting and sometimes fancy jazz harmony. And of course, you're giving your electric guitar a really good run out, plugging it into an amp on the verge of exploding. What's not to like? So as ever, thanks for joining me, guys. Please do like and subscribe and comment down below. All of those things help this channel hugely, and they don't cost you anything but a couple of seconds of your time. And do let me know if you have any questions at all. As always, I'll be here again next week at the same time and place for something completely different. But in the meantime, do enjoy working on your jump blues and listen to some of those players I mentioned earlier. All right, cheers, guys. See you soon.